Older sister seeks justice for her sibling for 29 years in the United States. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I'm going to share with you a chilling story about a case that took place back in the 1980s, a mystery that remained unsolved for decades. It's one of those cases that left investigators stumped, but after nearly 30 years, a determined detective decided to take a fresh look at the evidence. He reopened the investigation, diving deep into the crucial details of the case, and after months of relentless work, this detective finally achieved a major breakthrough that cracked the case wide open. This is the story of Karin's murder. The main character of our story is Karin, a 25-year-old woman full of life. She was outgoing, vibrant, and someone who always stood out among her friends. Karin lived in Ogden, a city in Weber County, Utah, in the United States. Ogden is a picturesque area, surrounded by stunning landscapes, and it's not far from the Great Salt Lake, the largest saltwater lake in the Western Hemisphere. The natural beauty of the region, with its mountains and shimmering lake, made it a serene place to grow up. Karin was raised by her father and met a young man named Steve when she was still in high school. It was love at first sight, a whirlwind romance that swept them both off their feet. The two of them tied the knot right after graduating high school, just like many young couples eager to start their lives together. At first, their marriage was filled with the sweetness and joy typical of newlyweds. They were deeply in love, dreaming of a bright future together. But as time passed, that blissful honeymoon phase began to fade. The happiness they once shared didn't last long, and cracks started to appear in their relationship after just 3 or 4 years of marriage. The spark between them dimmed, and tensions grew day by day. Karin found it harder and harder to endure the strained marriage, so she made the difficult decision to separate from Steve and move in with her stepmother. She hoped the separation would give her some clarity and peace. But tragically, not long after this move, darkness descended upon her life. What exactly happened that fateful day? And what horrors did Karin have to endure? Let's rewind time and travel back to June 5th, 1980, to uncover the truth. It was June 5th, 1980, a Thursday to be exact. A few days earlier, Steve, Karin's estranged husband, had called her with an offer. He told her he wanted to pick her up, take her back to their old home, and treat her to a special dinner that evening. The timing wasn't random. It was Karin's birthday that day, and their wedding anniversary was just around the corner. Perhaps Steve hoped to rekindle their romance with this gesture. Karin, despite their separation, agreed to the dinner, thinking it might be a chance to at least have a civil conversation. After dinner, Karin decided to stay the night at Steve's house to rest, while Steve headed out for his usual night shift at a factory near the Great Salt Lake. His shift ran from 12:30 a.m. to 7 a.m., a schedule he'd been working for years. The next morning, after finishing his shift, Steve called Karin to remind her to head to work, but there was no answer. He tried calling several more times, growing increasingly anxious with each unanswered call. His mind raced. Something didn't feel right. Worried that something might have happened to her, Steve jumped into his car and sped home as fast as he could. When he arrived, he rushed into the house, heading straight to the kitchen to see if Karin had left a note for him. But there was nothing. No message, no sign of her. His heart pounding, Steve hurried upstairs to the bedroom to check on her. When he pushed open the door, he froze, overwhelmed by the horrifying sight before him. Karin was lying face down on the floor, blood pooling around her neck. Steve's knees buckled as panic set in. He was utterly terrified. Without wasting a second, He grabbed the phone and dialed the police. Minutes later, the police arrived at the scene, but it was already too late. Karin was gone. Investigators quickly descended on the house to process the crime scene and gather evidence. They found Karin still dressed in her nightgown, her body positioned in a way that suggested a violent struggle. Her feet were pressed against the wall, and her head was near the foot of the bed. There were clear signs of strangulation on her throat, deep marks left by the killer's hands. She also had scratches on her arms, indicating she had fought desperately for her life. The bedroom itself told a story of chaos. The blankets and sheets had been torn off the bed and scattered on the floor. Pillows were thrown aside, and the television had fallen from its stand onto the ground. The TV was still plugged in, its screen glowing faintly in the dim room. The bed frame, made of brass, showed signs of a struggle as well. Two of the brass rods at the headboard had been dislodged, one of them lying on the floor nearby. The police concluded that a fierce fight had taken place in that bedroom. Interestingly, the rest of the house showed no signs of damage or disturbance. No broken windows, no forced entry. The back door, a sliding glass door, had a security bar in place, making it impossible to open from the outside. The front door's lock was also intact, and none of the windows had been tampered with. Based on this, the police theorized that Karin might have let the killer into the house herself, or that the perpetrator had a key to get inside. The evidence suggested a brutal confrontation had unfolded. The scratches on Karin's arms showed she had fought back with everything she had. But in the end, the killer had overpowered her, using both hands to strangle her to death. The police's initial assessment was clear. This was a crime committed by someone Karin knew. With this theory in mind, investigators immediately began questioning Karin's family and friends. Some mentioned that Karin had been having emotional conflicts with her husband, Steve, in recent months. Steve himself admitted that their marriage had been rocky. They'd been separated for a while, and during that time, Karin had been living with her stepmother. But recently, the two had been trying to work things out, and on the night of the murder, Steve had invited Karin to dinner to reconnect. He claimed their relationship had warmed up significantly that evening, and there had been a sense of hope between them. His statement was partially backed up by Karin's stepmother, who confirmed that Karin had agreed to the dinner with Steve that night. However, the stepmother also revealed something critical. Karin had confided in her that she had no intention of fully reconciling with Steve. In fact, Karin had told her she was planning to file for divorce. The stepmother believed the marriage was beyond saving, and she had urged Karin not to go to the dinner, worried it might complicate things. But Karin had insisted, saying it was just a meal, and it wouldn't change her mind about the divorce. She even planned to use the opportunity to discuss the divorce with Steve face to face. After hearing the stepmother's testimony, investigators felt Steve's potential motive for the crime had just grown stronger. If Karin was serious about ending the marriage for good, Steve might have been driven to an act of desperation. The investigators called Steve in for another round of questioning. But this time, the interrogation took an unexpected turn. Steve claimed he knew who the killer was, and it wasn't him. He pointed the finger at Karin's newest boyfriend, a man named Bob. According to Steve, after their separation, Karin had started dating Bob, and whenever she felt emotionally overwhelmed, she'd turned to him for comfort. Steve described their relationship as close and supportive, but he suggested that Bob might have been jealous of the lingering connection between Karin and Steve. In a fit of rage, Steve theorized, Bob could have killed Karin to eliminate the competition. The police quickly tracked down Bob, Karin's alleged boyfriend, to investigate Steve's claims. Bob was cooperative with the investigation, insisting he had nothing to do with Karin's death. He told the police he truly loved Karin, and she loved him too. They were happy together. Bob emphasized that he always encouraged Karin to do what made her happy, and he had no reason to harm her. Friends and family of Karin backed up Bob's story, noting that while her relationship with Steve had been strained and unhappy, she always seemed joyful and at ease when she was with Bob. They couldn't imagine Bob doing something so horrific to her. They also pointed out that if anyone had a reason to be jealous, it would be Steve, not Bob. On top of that, Bob had a solid alibi for the night of the murder, which the police verified, ruling him out as a suspect. With Bob cleared, the initial investigation hit a dead end. The coroner's autopsy report was released, but due to the technological limitations of the time, the medical examiner couldn't pinpoint the exact time of Karin's death. They could only estimate it based on the level of digestion of her last meal and her known eating schedule. Forensic experts approximated that Karin died sometime between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Steve's night shift that evening started at 12:30 a.m., but he had clocked in late, at 12:45 a.m. The drive from his house to the factory took about 25 to 30 minutes, which wasn't a long distance. Given the estimated time of death, the police calculated that Steve could have committed the murder before heading to work, arriving at the factory just after the crime. However, Steve's co-workers at the factory reported that he had acted completely normal that night. No signs of nervousness, anxiety, or unusual behavior. This raised some doubts, but the timeline still made Steve a prime suspect. Then another name came up in the investigation. A man named Owen, a co-worker of Steve's who was also a close friend. The two were tight. They often went drinking, hunting, and fishing together. While Steve worked the night shift, Owen worked the day shift at the same factory. Steve, perhaps trying to deflect suspicion, pointed the police toward Owen as a possible suspect. The police quickly located Owen to question him. When they found him, they noticed something suspicious. Owen had several small scratches on his arms and face, which immediately heightened the police's suspicions. But Owen had an explanation. He claimed the scratches were from metal shavings at work. He said that while working on a cutting machine at the factory, tiny metal fragments often flew out and scratched him, a common occurrence, according to the factory supervisor. As for the bruise on his face, Owen explained that he had accidentally hit his head on a piece of equipment while bending down to pick something up during his shift. Owen also provided an alibi. After finishing his day shift, he had gone to a bar with some co-workers to drink and play pool. They were there from 8 p.m. until the bar closed at 4 a.m. the next morning. After that, he returned to the factory around 4:30 a.m. to pick up some things. His co-workers confirmed his story, and the police found no direct connection between Owen and Karin. They had barely interacted, and there was no apparent motive for Owen to harm her. Owen's DNA and hair samples were collected as part of standard procedure, and photos of his scratches were taken for evidence. With Owen's alibi holding up, he too was ruled out as a suspect. At this point, both suspects Steve had named, Bob and Owen, had been cleared by the police. Investigators began to believe Steve was lying to throw them off his trail. Not only did Steve's statement seem inconsistent, but he also had the strongest motive for the crime. On top of that, Steve had no alibi for the estimated time of Karin's death. Theoretically, he had plenty of time to commit the murder before heading to work. Based on this, the police issued a warrant for Steve's arrest, charging him with first-degree murder. All the evidence related to the case was presented in court. But there was a problem. The evidence was all circumstantial. There was no definitive direct proof tying Steve to the crime. In December 1980, the court delivered its verdict. Steve was acquitted of the first-degree murder charge and walked free. Karin's family was devastated by the ruling, furious at the lack of justice. The case officially became a cold case, an unsolved mystery. But Karin's older sister, Coco, refused to give up. She made it her life's mission to find her sister's killer, constantly searching for new evidence and pushing for answers, hoping one day the truth would come to light. Fast forward 26 years after the murder to 2006. Coco, as she had done for the past 26 years, visited the police station to ask about any progress in her sister's case. She had been a regular at the station, coming in year after year, but the police always gave her the same answer. They had no new leads. In reality, the case had been all but abandoned, gathering dust as a forgotten file. But this time, a detective named Benson took notice of Coco's persistence. He was deeply moved by her determination and unwavering commitment to her sister. Inspired by her resolve, Benson decided to take a closer look at the 26-year-old cold case. He spent months researching the details, poring over old reports and evidence logs, determined to find something that had been missed. Eventually, Benson made a formal request to his superiors, asking for permission to officially reopen the investigation. He teamed up with Coco, and together they began reviewing new leads and re-examining the evidence. His superiors approved the request, and in January 2007, the case was officially reopened. Detective Benson meticulously reviewed all the physical evidence from 1980, and one detail caught his eye: Karin's fingernails. He suspected there might be DNA from the killer trapped beneath them. Back in 1980, when the murder occurred, DNA technology wasn't used in criminal investigations, so no DNA tests had been conducted on Karin's nails at the time. Benson immediately sent the fingernails to a lab for DNA analysis, hoping this modern technology could unlock the truth. While waiting for the lab results, Benson decided to reach out to one of the original suspects, Owen. He called Owen, introducing himself. "Hello, this is Detective Benson. I'm reinvestigating Karin's case, and I'd like you to answer a few questions for me." On the other end of the line, Owen sounded nervous. His voice trembled, and he dodged many of Benson's questions, giving evasive answers. Owen's behavior made Benson suspicious. Could he know more about the case than he was letting on? Soon after, the DNA report came back, and it confirmed Benson's hunch. The results revealed traces of DNA from both Steve and Owen under Karin's fingernails. Benson then requested a forensic reevaluation of Karin's time of death, using more advanced techniques than those available in 1980. The forensic team analyzed the body temperature recorded at the scene and the environmental conditions at the time, concluding that Karin had died around 12:30 a.m. This new timeline was critical. Steve had clocked in at the factory at 12:45 a.m., and the drive from his house to the factory took at least 25 minutes. If Steve had committed the murder, the earliest he could have arrived at the factory would be around 12:55 a.m. This effectively cleared Steve as a suspect. He couldn't have been at the scene at the time of death. Owen, on the other hand, had claimed he was at the bar from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., but Benson wasn't so sure anymore. If Owen's DNA was under Karin's nails, how did it get there? Benson tracked down the co-workers Owen had been drinking with that night. They confirmed they had been drinking and playing pool together, but they couldn't say for certain that Owen had stayed with them the entire night. It was possible Owen had slipped away and returned later without them noticing. They also recalled seeing scratches on Owen the next day. Scratches he had claimed were from playing with his dog, which contradicted his earlier statement to the police about metal shavings at work. This inconsistency raised red flags for Benson. The police now considered Owen a serious suspect and planned to bring him in for questioning, but they were too late. Owen had left a goodbye note for his wife, stating he would never return, and then he fled. His credit card records showed he had escaped to Texas, and from there, he crossed the border into Mexico, throwing the investigation into limbo once again. By March 2007, the case took another dramatic turn. The police received a tip that Owen had run out of money and could no longer afford to stay in Mexico. He was planning to return to the U.S. Detective Benson, upon hearing this, reached out to Owen with a message. "I have enough evidence to file for an arrest warrant. I urge you to turn yourself in immediately." With no way out, Owen surrendered himself at a police station where he would face charges of first-degree murder. During his arrest, the police uncovered a troubling history about Owen. Back in 1972, a woman named Kimberly had been walking on a beach in Hermosa Beach, California, when Owen approached her, attempting to assault her. He had grabbed her by the throat, trying to strangle her, but Kimberly fought back fiercely and managed to escape. She reported the attack to the police, and Owen was arrested. He was put on trial in California, where Kimberly identified him as her attacker, but Owen's family provided an alibi for him, and he was acquitted, walking free. Now, with Karin's case, history seemed to be repeating itself. Owen's family once again hired a skilled lawyer from California to defend him. When the lawyer arrived, he made a shocking claim. The DNA found on Karin's fingernails wasn't blood. It was semen. He argued that this wasn't a murder case at all, but rather an intentional sexual encounter, implying Karin and Owen had been having an affair. The lawyer also claimed Owen's trip to Mexico wasn't an escape. Owen had simply gone to Texas to visit a friend, then traveled to a small town in Mexico for a short vacation. While there, he learned he might face murder charges, which is why he returned to the U.S. to face the allegations. Based on this defense, and with insufficient evidence to counter it, prosecutors dropped the murder charges against Owen, and he was released once again. Detective Benson, unwilling to let the case die, went back to the physical evidence from 1980, hoping to find even the smallest new clue. He had crime scene photos digitally enhanced using modern technology, determined not to overlook any detail, no matter how small. After tireless effort, Benson's persistence paid off. He discovered a tiny red dot, barely visible, on one of Karin's pieces of clothing. It looked like a drop of blood. Benson immediately contacted the lab, requesting they test the red dot for DNA. The blood stain was decades old, and the sample was incredibly small, making it difficult to detect anything conclusive. But the hard work paid off. The lab confirmed the blood belonged to Owen. The case was finally resolved, but questions still linger. Can we truly believe everything Owen claimed? And was Steve really the mastermind behind the murder? Or was he completely innocent? After the case closed, the media interviewed Coco, Karin's sister. Over the phone, she told reporters, "I know the person who killed my sister is in prison now, and that's what matters." But when asked if Steve might have been the mastermind, Coco pointed to a note on Karin's tombstone that read, "Only God knows." The truth may remain a mystery, buried with Karin. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.